are the early signs of a failing relationship that most people ignore? Story 1: Lack of patience with your partner. You need patience to listen and really hear all that another person has to tell you. Let's face it, we're not all fascinating in every conversation, but we still desire to be heard. Story 2: When you start assuming the worst of their motivations instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt. When you start holding grudges. When you don't feel like you can be authentic with them. When you stop laughing together, or really hearing them when they talk. Story 3: No flow. Everything is an effort. At the onset, you feel like you're working. Relationships take hard work in the long run, but at the beginning you should feel an ease with that person. Story 4: Getting irritated at them more easily, as you realize there's things about them you really don't like, but didn't realize would be an issue until after the honeymoon period ends. Story 5: You have a better time with most of your friends than with them. You get busy and find excuses to spend time outside the house or by yourself rather than be with them. Story 6: When the answer to do I want to live in a relationship like the one we have for the rest of my life is no, and you're basically only there for the potential, eclipse. Story 7: When things are forced, talking, trying to get that connection, everything being one-sided, selfishness, only thinking about their feelings and not putting yours into consideration. Story 8: When you stop asking them for advice or sharing your struggles challenges with them, BC you know they won't support you in the way you need, or you have a fight and you just get hit with that knowing this isn't going to work, that feeling will be back. Story 9: I do think some of the things people are listing here wanting to do things without them, less, prioritizing friends are, for what it's worth, signs of a different type of relationship. I'm middle-aged and spent a lot of time chasing high-chemistry frantic attachments before realizing that someone who simply enjoys spending time together, but not all of your time together, is a lot more sustainable and feels healthier. That being said, if you can't have a good conversation with them, they belittle you, or you have completely opposing senses of humor, hang it up. Story 10: There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all answer for this question. But there are several such early signs very likely to occur, although there's no telling exactly how many of them do appear, and in what order. Emotional distance, avoiding difficult conversations, decreased interest in the other person's life, secretly fantasizing about at the thought of being single or in a relationship with someone else. Story 11: Something I see kind of often. Person A asking a third party for advice about how to deal with a situation with person B, and after the third party responds with something like "that sounds messed up," person A rationalizes it by saying third party doesn't really know person B. Story 12: When your significant other shows disinterest with you over time and doesn't engage in any conversations, it could happen whether there is an underlying issue in the relationship or not. Story 13: Low-key, your body is almost rejecting the relationship. I thought I was happy I had A, but looking back the entire time I was with him I was going through depressive and anxious cycles and something about myself just felt off. At the time I didn't think it had anything to do with him because it was issues I presumed were only internal. Story 14: They don't want to spend time together. Little things annoy you them, lack of interest in each other's day or hobbies. No longer wanting a simple hug or wanting to cuddle or hold hands, difficulty looking into each other's eyes, finding it difficult to be open with them when you once were. My ex and I fell out of romantic love with each other, mutually, we went through the motions for too long before we broke up. Story 15: Stonewalling. When a person resorts to not talking and withdrawing but clearly is upset, if difficult stuff is not talked about it just festers and is one more nail in the coffin. Story 16: If your partner doesn't share their hobbies with you, doesn't introduce you to their friends, and doesn't open up about their struggles when they have problems, they just disappear, that kinda shows you're not really someone close to them. Story 17: Less touching with palms and something called ventral denial. It means turning your body away from your partner, and this even happens at a distance. Story 18: To all my fellow anxious depressed guys and girls reading this post, please don't fall victim to the urge to overgeneralize or jump to conclusions about your own relationships based on these comments. If you have a legitimate worry, communicate with your partner about it. Story 19: Going to bed without making up. It's the start of nothing good. Even if you don't resolve the issue, you can release the anger and remind yourself and them that you love and cherish them, and you'll overcome this obstacle together. Story 20: Calling each other babe in a performative way. It's such a strange thing. It's a certain way they do it with a kind of staccato tone that just seems so fake. I have seen this in text messages and heard it in multiple couples that are just horrible. Story 21: N-ball torture. Getting annoyed at small things they do or don't do. Feeling annoyed when you know you have to see them in the evening, or when you hear them chewing, or when they start talking and you just wish they would stop soon. Feeling annoyed when they kiss or hug you or give you affection, you might not even know you are annoyed. You just get that heavy feeling in your chest when you have to be in their vicinity, you hear an ugh go through your mind, then the arguments start, then you start avoiding seeing them, e.g. work later, making plans with friends or having new hobbies. Story 22: When exciting news happens, and they're no longer the first person you want to tell, that shift from "I can't wait to share this," to "they want really care" is a huge red flag. What was the first sign you ignored? Story 23: Finally something that I'm an expert on. When you'd rather be alone and try to avoid committing to seeing them after work, when you feel obliged to send them a message in the morning, with no idea what to say, when you feel criticized instead of supported, when you're not enough like you are. When you should change and improve, but the partner demanding said changes doesn't see anything wrong with their own behavior. Story 24: When you make excuses not to hang out with them, One of my first boyfriends, I used to say I was working when I wasn't, or I had other plans when I was staying home to watch TV or read. He eventually did click on that I couldn't be bothered with him. Story 25. A lot of people are referencing a lack of communication, but that's not an early sign. That's mid to late sign. Metacommunication, or talking about the relationship too much, that's an early sign. Couples that keep going back to conversations about the relationship itself should think about why that keeps happening. Story 26. This isn't always the case, but when dealing with them consistently feels like work or consistently makes you worried about their emotions reactions, and you're unexcited with the thought of having to deal with them because of it, or when you realize you can't talk to them about stuff, whatever that stuff is. Open communication is the key to all relationships, romantic or otherwise. Story 27. Not being able to be yourself around them by fear of being judged. Fighting over silly things, being annoyed by things you once found cute like tiny habits, ways of talking, words, to name a few. Story 28. When spending time together doing ordinary things feels no better than being alone. Or worse, you can love working alongside each other and parallel activities, but when you're just existing in a space, eventually you'll trip over each other and it's unpleasant. Story 29. Not feeling comfortable about bringing up the fact that you're not comfortable. Corollary. Not feeling comfortable sharing good news with them because you're worried about the repercussions of their feelings about your success. Story 30. Rejecting all bids for connection, no matter how big or small, e.g., rejecting or attempts to have a conversation or attempts to learn about each other's triggers, feelings, considerations, etc. Story 31. They are less willing to hear out your point of view if it differs from theirs, and they judge you for it. You feel like you need time to yourself or put off calling them, seeing them, because talking to them isn't as easy anymore and it takes effort. They make it clear that they're upset with you but won't tell you why when you ask them what you did. Story 32. If they are fighting all the time. Bonus points if they think it makes their relationship tougher or better than other people's. It's normal to have some difficulty, but if it's the right person you shouldn't be bickering about everything. Story 33. Issues going unresolved. Starting off as issues in the relationship being raised and placated to eventually ignored. This is truly why all these young men get broken up with out of the blue. For the past year they've been burning through goodwill as they ignore household chores, date nights, just comfortably living in the now with no thoughts on how to grow and support their partner. Story 34. As soon as you're apart, criticizing the other one to whoever listens. This tells me, you have nothing positive to say about them. You're no longer a team bragging about each other to other people. You're now another and want to make it clear to others the other partner is separate to you, does not represent you. It also tells me, you can't talk to them directly about whatever the issue is. You're going to others for emotional validation. Another sign if you go from having to no longer having without any particular reason, medical or social. It just stops one day without anybody acknowledging it, and soon you've got a dead bedroom of months, years, decades. Story 35. I don't mean PDA with this, but not acting like a couple around other groups of people, and only by yourselves. Obviously people can get distracted in groups, but if you're in a bar or social place together it should still be easy to tell you are dating. Story 36. Feeling doubts and conflicts that you don't admit to yourself or your partner. Trying to suppress this won't cause your negative feelings to magically disappear, not listening to an inner voice that's communicating that something is feeling wrong. Story 37. Feeling resentment towards each other. Eventually, if neither side fixes this, your relationship is over. I can't recall the exact scientific study research, but based on interviews of many couples for it, resentment is the ultimate killer of any relationship. Story 38. Fighting. It took me years of heartbreak to realize fighting isn't normal. Sure, disagreements happen, but if you're compatible, you'll work through those spats and communicate. Any relationship that involves huge fights, slamming doors, yelling, etc., is doomed for failure and essentially a giant red flag for incompatibility. Story 39. Neglect is a huge relationship killer. When they ignore you and push you away and stop putting effort into the relationship. If they act like they don't care, believe them, they don't. Story 40. I see selfishness as the fundamental problem facing couples. Our society more and more considers self-interest to be a worthy goal. While there's certainly quite a lot that is positive about independence, it's not how true partnerships are formed. If you and your partner are each largely focused on yourselves, it leads to conflict. But if you change your focus to the needs of your partner, and your partner does the same for you, then everyone's needs continue to be met, and the conflict has nowhere to live. Story 41. If an argument relating to the relationship, even a minor one, never gets settled, the last 2 relationships I've ended each ended on account of an issue that came up within a month or 2 of starting to date and just never got resolved. If you communicate as clearly as you can, listen to your partners, their expectations and desires, and still can't reach an accord, the issue is going to remain, and it's just as bad if you reach an accord verbally without their behavior changing. Story 42. Then not protesting things they used to protest. For example, you can't go out with your boys, because I want you to spend time with me turns into, okay, have fun, no ounce of protest. Story 43. Constant side eyes and awkward interruptions. It started like that with this couple me and my wife knew. We knew both of them before they got married, so when they hooked up it was really cool and they seemed great for each other. They were married very quickly. Around 2 years later we went out to stay with them for a weekend after having not seen them in a while, and something had really changed. In the middle of talking they would constantly stop to look over at the other, but in a very intense, almost challenging way. Then they would interrupt one another, one more than the other to be fair, constantly correcting or contradicting. The whole weekend there was this palpable tension. Maybe 3 years later, she had an affair and they got divorced. Whole thing was just depressing. Story 44. Thinking of yourself with someone else. Not missing the person after being at work for 8 hours. Not much communication, little to no intimacy. If it's toxic, continuous arguments, not really caring about making up. I feel like if you're wondering to yourself, it may be the first red flag. Story 45. When your buddy starts telling you I put 5 on the Knicks game. Don't tell insert GF spouse here won't commit to plans with you till their other friends check in. Story 46. Early stages include loss of curiosity, or loss of spark. Essentially you stop wondering and searching and start managing and avoiding. I don't think it's meant to be avoided. Could be a compatibility issue or issue with one both separately. Story 47. You feel pity for them instead of love. You stop talking about the world with them because you lose respect for their opinions. You avoid certain conversations because you already know the ending. You stop trying to work through problems because you already know that they'll only be able to see themselves as the victim. Story 48. You don't come up with solutions together when having arguments or disagreements. Plus if you have to straight up ask them if why they're still with you, i.g. in my case, they also didn't try to think of a thoughtful answer, then that's also an issue. Story 49. Jealousy possessiveness. I'm sorry but it just isn't acceptable. I'm sorry you were cheated on before, but that's not my fault, so why am I paying the price? Story 50. Wow, I had no idea that my little comment would resonate with so many people, and inspire such a profound and scholarly association. Thank you for the information. Story 51. When you start relating to the lyrics in a song that go I wish you'd somebody, and relate to the singer wishing their partner would do something so that they would have a clean break. Story 52. Projecting intentions without discussing the truth. Bottling up feelings and displaying resentment or passiveness. Being reactionary or bluntly aggressive without taking a pause to fully consider a situation or intention. Using money and income to control a power dynamic. Talking badly about your partner in front of friends, family, co-workers, etc. Story 53. Everything you say annoys them. Dismissive behavior, lack of physical intimacy. I recall being so oblivious that it's been 4 or so months since my partner and I had slept together, and I just accepted they were busy with work while still going out and partying with colleagues. I was not a bright person in my 20s. Story 54. When you try to communicate about the disconnect you've started to feel and want to try and make it better, and then they constantly get defensive and shut down instead of trying to make it work. And then they start spending 100% of their free time with other people instead of you, and constantly look for reasons to make plans with other people to replace the plans you've already made even weeks in advance. Story 55. Well, for narcissistic men they may not notice that their girlfriend actually left them a month ago. She's still there, sitting on the couch, quietly eating a snack, maybe even watching TV, but she's gone. She was gone a month ago. Story 56. When communication and time spent together diminishes, it can go from texting and calling often throughout the day, seeing each other often every week, to ignoring messages and not making time to see your partner. I always believed in the saying if they wanted to, they would. It doesn't take hours to send good morning or hey how are you doing or just a small check-in during the day. It also shouldn't be difficult for your partner to make time for you, especially when they have in the past. The relationship will not last if that all goes away. Story 57. Christ, I feel like Casually Explained could make a video based on this thread. So okay, if she literally shoots you in the arm or leg with a handgun that you're reasonably certain she's not legally allowed to possess or carry, well she could just be an American, so really it's still too hard to say. Better not be hasty.